Hi everyone, and welcome to this podcast on the calculations of multipliers in the short, medium, and long term in the case of a fiscal policy financed by borrowing. We already know how to calculate the multiplier in the short term. Let's do a quick reminder though. We differentiate the equations IS and LM. We combine them by isolating dr or dy and reinserting the term in the other equation. And then we obtain dy and dr. Recall the crowding out effect that we can see here in the denominator of dy. All right, let's go to the medium term now. Be careful, in the medium term, we have a new endogenous variable, the general level of prices, P. So we need to calculate a new multiplier, dP. To do this, we will use the production function, y equals f of n, and the profit maximization condition in imperfect competition, f prime of n equals 1 plus m times w over p. By differentiating these two equations, we obtain dy equals f prime of n dn, and the second one gives f second of n dn equals 1 plus m times dw over p minus w over p squared dp. Because we are in the medium term, the nominal wage is fixed, which means that dw equals 0, so we can remove this term. So we can reformulate equation 2 to express dn as a function of dp. By reinjecting this dn in the first equation, we then obtain a formula that links dn and dp. If we call that expression, which is a little bit complex, theta p, we can then obtain a relationship between dy and dp, such as dy equals theta prime times dp. This theta prime therefore establishes a relationship between the variation of the production and the variation of prices. From there, we now have three equations to obtain our three multipliers. IS differentiated, LM differentiated, and this last equation that we just obtained, which links dy and dp. We inject the dy that we have in equation C into equation A, which allows us to have a system of two equations with two unknowns. From there, we look for dp, which equalizes dys and dyd. In other words, we look for the price that equalizes supply and demand of goods. Finally, you only have to solve this system to find the medium-term multipliers. When you're done doing the math, you will see that dy medium-term is lower than dy short-term, because precisely we have a new term in the denominator, which measures the price crowding out effect. We can then proceed and simply calculate dp medium term and dr medium term. In the long term, we have a new endogenous variable here again, because w became flexible, so we need to calculate dw. The calculations in the long term are actually rather easy, because the real wage w over p comes back to its equilibrium level gamma. So dw over p equals 0. If we develop this expression, we find that dW over W equals dP over P. Because the real wage does not vary, we also know that output and employment will not vary in the long term. So dy long term equals dn long term equals 0. In other words, in the long term, the fiscal policy has no impact on the real variables. It only has an impact on the nominal variables P, R, and W. We then take our equations IS and LM to calculate the multipliers. In IS, we replace dy by 0, so you'll get dr easily, which you can then inject in LM to obtain dp. And finally, using the real wage differentiated, we obtain dw.